something that I was going to say was better than ever.
Better than ever is our
Paying
ability.
bills is better than ever because you don't have to do anything.
Better than ever.
Is it better than ever?
It's better than ever because
I'm like, I'm gonna make everything better. It's gonna be awesome.
Better than it's ever been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're gonna be thankful for things.
Even if you use
Yeah,
better than ever.
I have a goal, and here's my goal, is for my wife to laugh at my jokes as much as she laughs at your jokes at the June presentation every year. So, Jay Moore, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me how did you get here? I love to ask people in Abilene, how did you get here? How did you arrive here?
In Abilene?
Well, just however you want to tell it, like however you want to tell your story. Where did it start, and how did you taught school, and how did you do all the things? What do you want to highlight? How'd you get here? Are you from? You're from Abilene.
I was born right here, just a few blocks away.
Yeah.
I was born in Abilene, been here nearly my whole life.
Okay.
And I did teach public school for nearly 30 years. Didn't start teaching until I was in my 30s.
Wow.
So
What'd you do before then?
I worked for a company that was a real estate development company that wound up in the banking business.
Okay.
And that was not for me.
Not for you.
Not for me.
Yes.
I quit on my 30th birthday. I said, I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so I thought, what should I do?
Yeah.
And I went home and I dug out. I don't know if you're familiar with Johnson O'Connor.
No.
Johnson O'Connor's a national business, but they have offices in Dallas.
Okay.
And they do aptitude testing.
Okay. Yeah.
And when I was in high school, my dad took me over there, see what I had aptitudes for.
Yeah.
And I stuck it in a drawer. And then on my 30th birthday, I dug it back out of the drawer. I thought, what did that thing say I would have an aptitude for? And one of the things it said was teaching. Yeah. Another one was law, but I was too old to go to law school. So I thought, well, I'll go get my teaching certification and see if I like that. So that's what I did.
That's awesome. Yeah. Sometimes I teach college, and sometimes I ask my students, we do a little discussion question of the day. What's the worst job? And so I think of that sometimes where you think, I could do that job. And then sometimes you're like, I could never do that job.
No.
I do not need to be a part of that.
No.
I think being a vet would probably be the worst
you
job
think?
oh my gosh. No, it'd be terrible. Like you have to smell dogs' ears to know if they have like mites in their ears. No. That's terrible. You have to put a glove on up to your elbow or your shoulder. No, I'm out of that. So anyway, okay. So then you taught. Right.
Taught at same school.
Yeah.
Taught at Abilene High School, nearly in the same room, except for April Fool's joke one time sent me to the room next door, and I stayed there. So, but I taught in social studies. I taught mostly U.S. history and world geography.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And I heard through the grapevine that students showed up early to be in your class.
Well, I was, for years, I taught what they call a zero period class, which met before school. Yeah. And selfishly, I taught it because, I got out earlier than everybody else. In fact, for 2 summers, it worked out really well because I got out early because I came out here and I served as the assistant to the president.
Oh, cool.
During those summers, and I actually came out here in the afternoons during the school year.
Interesting.
But, yeah.
Oh, wow. All right.
Anyway, that was a short-lived gig, though.
Yeah. And then you put on this presentation in June, right? And so how long is that? Oh, go ahead.
Was it June? Yeah, it was. I don't remember when it was.
Or was it May? Was it?
I think it was May.
It was May. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I've done a lot of presentations, a lot of stuff on local history.
Yeah.
And for several years, I would do stuff at the Grace Museum in their ballroom. And it was not large enough. And I thought, well, I could move to a different venue. So I looked into the Paramount, which was quite a bit larger as far as how many it'll seat. And that was in 2017. And, I was hoping I would have been thrilled for 300 people showed up. And 1,100 people showed up. And so I've kept it at the Paramount ever since. I didn't do it for a couple of years during COVID. But I think the one that I did this past May was the 10th, or maybe 11th one.
Wow.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. We made the teenagers go.
Oh.
Not this year, but the years prior. And so I told my daughter, who's 13, I said, Jay Moore's going to be on the podcast. She's like, if Jay Moore's on the podcast, people actually listen.
Oh.
So that's
How
what
old
we're
is she
hoping.
now?
She's 13.
Oh, she's 13 now.
Yeah, she's 13 now. So she got 10-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old. You know,
Yeah.
she's in that phase, and she loved it.
Well,
So
she needs to. So she's going to be, what will she
she'd be an 8th grader.
8th grader next year.
At Madison.
Well, if you're still here when she is in the 10th grade,
Yeah.
which I hope you are,
Yeah.
the program I now give direction to called Stone Owl is a program for high school juniors and seniors, but you can enroll when you're a sophomore in high school. And it is a program that I didn't think up. I was hired to create it. And students come for 9 Sunday afternoons.
Yeah.
And we look at some of this country's history and how it started and some of the debates that they hashed out, et cetera. Anyway, your daughter would receive a $3,000 scholarship for completing the program. And, you know, we meet an hour and a half for 9 Sundays. She can miss one. And she gets a $3,000 scholarship. And if she comes to Hardin Simmons, AC, or McMurray, they match it. And it's not just for kids who are going to four-year college. In fact, we're trying to draw in a lot more kids going the vocational route.
Interesting, yeah.
And so far, we've sent several kids to do things that, if you're just getting some hours at, say, Cisco Junior College, $3,000 goes a long way.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But so far, over 700 kids have gone through it. I got kids driving from San Angelo all over. And the foundation gives away 120 scholarships a year. So your daughter's chance of being accepted are quite high.
Yeah. My seniors, my twins, are signed up for it.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, they are. Yep.
Which session do you know?
I think it's the fall session.
Yeah, I kind of
Right,
changed it
fall,
up.
like fall
Yeah,
and
there's
spring,
one in
yeah.
fall, and now
Yeah,
there's one that's fall, early fall, late fall.
Yeah.
But good. Well, that's great.
Yeah,
I'm glad they're
so,
in it.
yeah.
It's a heck of a deal. I wish it had been around when my kids were looking for college scholarships, because that is a really good deal. They've given away close to $2 million in scholarships.
Wow, that's incredible. That's really neat. Yeah.
That's the Diane Graves Owen Foundation doing that.
That's really cool. And you get to connect with them. And like, how many you're teaching at once? What does
I
that
teach
look
groups of 40, so I do it 3 times a year.
Okay.
So 40 kids, and now we'll meet at Abilene Heritage Square, because that's the space that was built to house Stone Owl scholars.
That's cool.
Anyway, I'm thrilled that your daughter's in it. They're both in the same session?
My twin boys.
Oh, twin boys.
Twin boys. Are,
Boys.
yeah, they're my middle. They're my
Gotcha.
middle guys. Yeah, my.
You don't look old enough to have kids that age. My gosh.
Thank you. That's very kind. My little babies, my twins, are like 6'1" or 6'2" or something like that, and they're about
They'll
to graduate.
stand out then.
Yeah, that's right. They're Cooper Cougars. So
Good.
yeah. So that'll be fun. Okay, so you're in the business of history and telling the story and thinking through all those things. Like in Abilene, I always wonder, people make a big deal about who's your great grandfather, who's your lineage. There have been shows about it and things like that. And so, like, I always think, is it a big deal who my great grandfather's? Is it a big deal why we built this building? Is it a big deal why this thing was here? Or are we more here and now, and the past doesn't really matter? So that was one of my questions for you. And what do you think about that?
Well, obviously, I think that it does matter.
Yeah.
And I think it matters because, if you think about your family, and when you get together at Thanksgiving with your family, and maybe you've got aunts and uncles there, and I don't know who else there.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting there at the table, you know who everybody is.
Yeah.
You know their stories. Yeah. You know how you fit in. And all of that gives you a sense of identity.
Yeah.
It helps you know who you are. It helps you know how you fit into that family. I think, and the same is true for a nation. Most people have a decent understanding of the nation's history, and we understand how it came to be and how we fit in and all of that. But when it comes to some local building or some street that's got a name on it or a business, people don't tend to think that that's a connective power, but I think that it is, because I think just as you get your identity from your family and from your nation, you got a lot of your identity in who you are in the place that you live, and that you understand the history of that place and how it all fits together. and I have no way to actually quantify that and prove that.
Yeah.
But I sense that, and I sense that by the number of people who show up to learn about local history.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the hard things about history is that you can't quantify it.
No.
It's got to be the story.
Yeah.
When I got my PhD at Texas A&M, and we had to take 70, 72 hours, 75 hours, something like that. But we had to do hours outside of the department. And so one semester I chose 2 history courses. And I chose U.S. Naval History and I chose historiography. And I was really excited about the naval history, and I was not excited about the historiography, but that's the only thing that fit into my schedule. So what happened was it was the exact opposite, where that naval history class, they would get into long debates over like the rivets on an aircraft carrier. Oh my goodness, I'm dying. And pour me out on the floor. It was a night class, and it was pretty rough. Anyway, but that historiography class was really fascinating. It was incredible. And it was taught by a guy who was a professor at A&M who was like a Russian history guy. But we talked about who gets to tell the story, why the story is important, and how we can never really quantify the story, which is pretty cool. So,
Yeah. Well, you find some identity in the fact that you're a Texas A&M Aggie.
Yeah.
I mean, you must.
Yeah.
You went there. You have a degree from there.
Yeah.
Maybe you drank the Kool-Aid. Maybe you didn't. But that's part of who you are, and where you live is part of who you are.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
knowing about it deepens that connection.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One of the things we talk about in my class is like perception, self and perception and self. And so I always say, like, where you're from is your lens, like how you see the world. I'm from the west side of Odessa, and that's my lens. I see the world through a different lens.
You see
than
the
a
world
lot of
through
people.
dust.
Yes, that's exactly right. Through the desert. That's exactly right. When I read about Moses or Abraham, I'm like, that's kind of like close to where
Are you
I'm
from Odessa, or is there a town west of there?
Just West Odessa, yeah. Not West Odessa, just the west side of Odessa. Yeah, in the city limits, which is a whole other world out there. But anyway, yeah. So what drew you to, how did you start this path of Abilene? Like, why Abilene? Like, why? I mean, I know you're from here, but you did a deep dive on all of these. You've written how many books about Abilene?
Oh, I don't keep track. Not that many. I mean, I think maybe 5 or 6 that are specific to Abilene, but I've also written books that are, like I've written a book about some Abilene families. Those are really not books that are publicly for sale. They're more of a commissioned book.
Right. Yeah.
So I've done several of those. Yeah. But so why Abilene? Well, I guess because I live here. I mean, if I lived in West Odessa, I think I'd be the same way, and I'd learn about West Odessa, because really what drives it is not a love of history. It's a need to understand. It's a curiosity. Yeah. And I've always been a very curious person about things, and wanted to know answers, wanted to know why. And that's what most historians are. They get labeled as historians, but really it's just somebody who wants to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it was really drove home to me. This has probably been 30 years ago. A friend of mine here who's a doctor, he called me one day and said, we've got this new doctor. She's been here about a year. And she came into my office today and she said, look, every day when I drive to our office, I drive down Judge Ely, I turn on Ambler, I cross Treadaway, I go by Hendrick, and I get to our office. And she said to him, who is Judge Ely? Who is Ambler? Yeah. Who is Treadaway? And who is Hendrick? And my friend, the doctor who had lived here for quite a while, he wasn't sure of all those answers, so he called to ask me, and I gave him the answers, and I suppose he told her. But what it made me realize is she doesn't know those. She just lived here for a short time. She doesn't know that they are all people. Yeah. She doesn't know the story behind those people. But neither did my friend who had lived here a long time. Is a very educated person, obviously. So I thought, if you could tell more of those stories, even if it's explaining who the heck Judge Walter Raleigh Ely was, you might feel more of a connection to this place. Yeah. And so that's really what set me on the path to start telling stories. And initially I did it through documentary, like video documentary style things, and lots of writing, and then more public presentations. But really it was just because it dawned on me, people don't know. I knew a lot of that just because I was curious, and I had figured out who Shelby Treadaway was and who Emory Ambler was. And I knew about T.G. and Ida Hendrick because I'd read about them and wanted to know who they were. And so I just feel like other people want to know that whether they consciously think I would like to know that, I think once they hear it, they're like, oh, I feel a connection because of it.
We have lots of new people in Abilene.
We do
right now. What should they know?
What should they know?
Yeah. So if you meet somebody new here, what do you tell them?
I don't know that I meet a lot of new people. I think a lot of the people here are new here currently are here temporarily.
Right.
Once these data centers are built, they're gone. They're just here to build them.
Yeah.
So I don't think I have a good answer to that question.
Yeah.
You can edit that one out.
What's your favorite Abilene? Like, what's the highlight? If you're going to tell somebody one story about Abilene, what's the story?
No. Well, that's a hard one to answer.
I didn't send this to you
No, you didn't.
before it at all.
You didn't. I didn't get that any thought. But I do think, I think one of the defining things about Abilene, if you really want to understand Abilene, is the struggle we had for decades over whether or not to sell alcohol.
Yeah.
And it was a struggle based in economics, but also based in religion and based on people's perception of right and wrong. And Abilene had been dry 75 years when it was voted wet in 1978.
Wow.
And it's not like there weren't, in that 75 years time, there was several other times when the issue came up and some vote or some debate was taking place about it. And it really helped. It helps you understand Abilene, I think, if you understand that and how that shaped our thinking.
I grew up in a Southern Baptist church in the late 80s, 90s. And I tell my kids, or I tell college students sometimes, like, you just cannot imagine what a big deal it was, what a big deal alcohol was, or what a big deal. One of my youth workers, when I was growing up, he was really close to our family, really, really great friend, really great mentor, but he was divorced. And so they were talking about, should he be a deacon or an elder, and like, where does that all fit? And I'm like, you just cannot imagine what a big deal it was.
It was.
Or a tattoo, or like everything was a big deal. Smurfs were a big deal.
That's right.
Everything was a big deal. Yes. You're like, what? I don't know how that even Smurfs, I don't know how that happened, where the pastor's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this week. Maybe Smurfs. But yeah, alcohol for sure. It was a really big deal. Yeah. And even for, I guess, the older generation, it's still a big deal.
Some people, it seems to have died down quite a bit. And it didn't turn out to be the bugaboo some people really thought it was going to be.
It's true. They thought it was going to be the big slippery slope.
That's right.
Debauchery.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So one of the things we talk about, the name of this podcast is Better Than Ever. So if you're in Abilene, what's better than ever now? When we're thinking through this, like I talk, like in my college classes, I talk about food. Mm-hmm. And I say, like, you can, like, 100 years ago, or even medicine and lifespan and those sorts of things, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, you had, and I have a class of 25 students, and I'm like, okay, all y'all, let's say it's 1891, the founding of HSU, all of y'all, the quarter of the class, y'all just die. Upon birth, and then you guys get to live till 5 years old. Y'all live till 15, and then y'all live and it really is. There's so many things that are better than ever. So, like with history, you could talk about the good old days or whatever. Like, how are we misremembering things or not remembering things correctly?
You kind of changed the tone of the question there in the middle. So now
you talk about whatever you want.
Well, I would say, and not just Abilene, but I mean, if you're thinking, okay, what are some differences if somebody who was 150 years ago? Well, first of all, there's light bulbs now. That's huge. That is huge. You already mentioned medicine, but the fact that you would see a lot more old people now, and you would see a lot more young people now. Yeah. And in those days, neither one of those was really that true. It was pretty rare. Hot water. My granddad probably didn't take a hot shower with hot water piped into the shower probably until the 1950s.
Golly, that's awesome.
You could boil hot water and pour it in the bathtub, but people taking a hot shower was unheard of.
Yeah.
And that is not all that long ago.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say in our lifetime, some of the big changes have been television. And the choices you have on television. It's unbelievable. I mean, I don't think a young person today could even appreciate how far television has come in and entertainment in your home. But I think what would really surprise if someone from 150 years ago, if they were here today, I think they'd be surprised. I think they'd be surprised that women vote.
Yeah.
I think they'd be surprised that we vote in secret. Because for, the first 100 years or more of this country, you did not vote in secret.
Really?
No.
What did that look like?
Well, usually most elections were held in the county seat. People came into the county seat. It was either on a Tuesday or Saturday. And to vote, you literally walked up to the person tallying the votes and you said out loud who you were voting for. Or you handed him a piece of paper. And that piece of paper had the people you wanted to vote for on it. And it was handed to you by someone who was on that ticket. That's what it was called, a ticket. So that person running on the ticket would hand you the ticket. And you had to sign your name on the back of the ticket. No one signs their name when they go vote. Or you signed your name to show that you've come to vote, but nobody can tell who you voted for in this day and time. In 1892, Texas took on the secret ballot. No one knows who you vote for. Back then, on those days, it was like a fair. The guy who's running for politics might give you $5 and a ticket. He might give you a bottle of whiskey and a ticket. And so elections were terribly skewed and certainly not private. I mean, you want to walk up in front of earshot, say who you're voting for, a lot of people wouldn't do it. Wow. So the fact that we now vote in secret, I think, would surprise a lot of people. The fact that it took till the 19th Amendment for women to vote, and even then, that was mostly just white women. Another thing I think would greatly surprise people is the percent of adults who now have a college education. Yeah. I think it's nearing 40% of adults in this country over age 25 who have a bachelor's degree. In the 40s, it was 4%. Yeah. I mean, it has really grown exponentially, but unfortunately, so is the cost of college. But that would, I think, greatly surprise people.
Yeah. Like you see the Unbroken or Boys in the Boat or something where it's like college boy, this college boy, that college boy, that. And it's because nobody was doing that.
That's right.
Yeah. There were so few people going to college. Yeah.
I think if you went the other way, if you and I were able to jump back 150 years, I think one thing we would immediately be surprised by are horses. Yeah. Because, this day is half over and I haven't seen a horse yet.
That's true.
And you probably haven't seen a horse yet either.
It's true.
But 130 years ago, 40 years ago, you'd have seen horses all day long.
Yeah.
That was a huge deal. I mean, in horse manure, we don't even think about that.
I was about to say that, yes.
New York City, I've read this in more than one place, and it just seems unbelievable this is true. 500 tons of horse manure was picked up every day. That's 1 million pounds of horse manure every day.
You want to be upwind.
Yeah.
So
I think that would surprise us.
Yeah, that would. I think people smell would surprise us. Because especially if it's the winter time and you can't get hot water, like who wants to take a cold bath in January or whatever? Yeah.
That was an accepted part of life in those days that people did not smell good. Today, we find it repulsive.
Yeah. One of the questions I sent you is, do you think people today suffer from historical amnesia? You think we're forgetting things? And while you think about that, I'll say it like this. One of the things I study is media and the media cycle. And so if we go back to, I started grad school in 2000. And there was the Today Show, and there was these 3 networks, maybe a 4th network, maybe a 5th network, like things tacked on, CNN and Fox News tacked on. But for the most part, it was 3. And something happened. Katrina happens. And then this controversy happens. And we talk about it for a long time. And now things happen, and it's very loud for like 3 days or maybe like half a day. And then we just keep going. And it's so many things that I don't think we can even keep up with even a tragedy a year or 2 ago, we're like, oh yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, so that's kind of the way I think about it. And you could talk about amnesia, or you could talk even about media, the way we remember things from the past. But what about, I think we're losing things. things are happening so fast that we lose the details of the past.
Well, it definitely comes at you like a fire hose these days.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure that we're forgetting is that we're not able to put into context how important something is or how unimportant something is. Because sometimes it's big news when something tragic happens to one person.
Yeah.
You use the example of Katie Couric's mother. That's been huge news. Yeah. And that's one person. It's a tragedy and it's terrible.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you knew what was happening in Sudan, and you had it in context, you might give a little bit more ear to Sudan and what's happening over there. But I'm not so much that we forget is that what we consider our news these days, and you can correct me because you're the authority on this, I don't see it as news. I see it as entertainment. Yeah. And it's just people talking about current events, but it's not, in my opinion, news. It's a lot of times it's just the manipulation of what's happening. And as you're probably well aware, when the fairness doctrine lapsed in, what was that, 87, 88? Yeah. And suddenly network news no longer, or you could have a news outlet that didn't have to give both sides of a story. Yeah. And that immediately spawned things like CNN, Fox News, Rush Limbaugh. And people found they landed wherever it confirmed their biases. And so that's what they listen to these days. And I find that to be very dangerous. And that probably is not the answer to your question about amnesia. But that's what came to mind when you were talking about that.
Yeah. My wife's grandma passed away 2 Octobers ago. She was born in 1920. And she lived to be 104 years old. Wow. And she talked about she saw life get faster and busier and busier. It just, she was an incredible person, but she would just say, like, with a lot of sadness, she would say, like, it just got busier and busier and busier. And I think we would be surprised at how slow everything was. Oh, yeah. And just, you had time to whittle, or there was just nothing to do. Nothing to do. There was just literally nothing to do.
Oh, I can remember growing up, I wouldn't say I was bored, but you'd go outside and figure out something to go do. Oh, yeah. But you didn't have a phone to thumb through. Yeah. Or you didn't have all these streaming channels on your television. I mean, you had to go out and kind of make your own entertainment. It did seem slower just because you were figuring out your own pace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yep. So what is about history? What is better than ever right now? Is there anything that's better than ever? Can we know more?
Oh, we can certainly find answers easily. Yeah. I always laugh at, and I'm sure you've seen it. If you wanted to, find a picture of a raccoon with a clown hat on, you could spend all day in the library back in the 1970s and you'd never find it. Well, now you can find it in four strokes on your phone. You got a picture of a raccoon with a hat.
Right.
You make it.
Right.
But, there's so much information out there. I think the danger comes in putting it in the right context and understanding how it fits in. Yeah. I mean, we hear all this news today about, the Middle East has been in the news since you and I were kids. It's just, there's always been trouble in the Middle East. But unless you truly understand World War I, you can't put it in context. Yeah. You really can't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That clicked. I don't know if that went off.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah.
You have to sometimes know more than just, like Dias Air Force Base is in Abilene, Texas. That's a fact. You know that. That's easy to know. But there would not be a Dias Air Force Base if there was not a Fort Phantom Reservoir. And that was nearly 20 years before we had an air base. And I could tell the whole story is how that all ties together. Yeah. But honestly, the water out here is a big thing. And the fact that we had the water, which led to Camp Barkley, which led to Dias Air Force Base. You can't understand Abilene unless you understand the push for railroads to go west. Yeah. We wouldn't be here. And we're only here in this arbitrary spot because they needed water for steam engines. Yeah. And so sometimes we can know the facts, but it helps to have the context.
Yeah, for sure. I'm from
the west side,
the west side of Odessa. So
you're a railroad town.
You think, you look out there, my dad grew up in Pecos, and so I've been to Europe a few times, I've been to Ireland a few times, and I always thought, like, I would love to bring some of these people to Pecos and just drop them off and say, like, look at this beautiful place. But yeah, you think, like, nobody rode their horse out and was like, this is it.
This is the spot I want to be
This is
at.
the spot. I want to grow old right here. Yeah.
Now, that's the thing about West Texas. You don't live here for the beauty.
Yeah.
You really don't. You live here, and I think what keeps people here is connections.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And what keeps me here is December, January, and February.
Oh.
And I love that weather. I don't love it. This July's been incredible. I mean, this weather right now is like record-breaking low.
Oh, I like the hot weather. You like the cold
Do you
weather.
really?
I'll take hot weather any day of the week.
I like it when it's like a high of 60.
Yeah.
Is the absolute best. Yeah. When you're a teacher. I'm a teacher. What's your hope? What was your hope for your students or the Stone Owl? The Stone Owl group, these 40 students, like what's your hope what do you want them to carry with them after a class?
I think more than anything, I want them to understand that that they don't understand everything. You know, it's kind of that, was it Socrates that said, I know that I know nothing? Yeah. And smart people tend to know that they don't know everything, and they're willing to listen and research and dissect and think it through. And then, you know, it's the ignorant people, according to Bertrand Russell, that think they know everything that is so frustrating, because there are people who think they know it all. And those people are the ones that aren't learning. And I think for students that I taught in Abilene High, or students I teach in Stone Owl, is I want them to understand that they don't know it all. I don't know it all. You don't know it all. And if you understand that you're ignorant to some point, then you should go out there and figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's really up to you. I mean, in this day and time, you can do a lot of education on a computer or on your phone. So really, that's the thing. You know, it's kind of that whole Dunning-Kruger effect that, you know, smart people know they're not smart. And dumb people don't know they're not dumb, don't know they're not smart. And really, that's it. I want people to understand that they should go out there and figure it out. And I really encourage them. In fact, I show them the media biases chart, which I'm sure you probably use in your class. And because they're gonna get their news somewhere. But if they're getting it off to the far left or off to the far right, they may not be thinking things through enough, because both sides leave out some of the information. I think I tend to read the BBC and Reuters and the Associated Press, because those, first of all, they're British owned, and they tend to be less biased. And so I encourage kids to think for themselves and look at that. And the other thing I remind them of, and a lot of kids, even adults in this day and time, don't understand that their phone is feeding them the news that they want to know, and they don't even recognize that that's what it is. You know, when we were growing up, and you talked about the 3 networks and all that, everybody was getting the same news. We were all reading the same newspaper. We all were seeing the same information. But what I'm getting on my phone is not what my wife's getting on her phone, or you're getting on yours. And people forget that or don't know that.
Right.
And that's a very frightening thing.
Yeah. I tell my students, that's most of what this is most of what I teach. And so I have 2 students, and you search for Trump, and it deals you this, and you search for Trump, and it deals you this.
That's right.
I do a card trick, and it's like, I've taught this class 1,000 times, but I get really nervous for this card trick, because sometimes it doesn't work. Most of the time it works, but I do this card trick, and so we do these piles and all this stuff, and so it goes on and on and on, and you know, they choose their card and show the class and everything. I don't know which one it was or which one it is, and so they choose and choose and choose, and then the very last thing, they're all turned over, and I'm like, is it this one? Is it the 4, 4 of diamonds? And I flip it over, and they're like, oh my gosh. And I say, you thought you were choosing this whole time, but I was choosing for you.
That's
and
right.
so I tie it into the media lecture, because it's absolutely doing that.
Well, that's what people, I think, don't understand this day and time about artificial intelligence. A lot of people say, oh, I don't use it. I don't look things up on Claude or Chat GPT or anything. And it's not that you don't use it. It's what people are missing is that AI is collecting so much data about individual people and their habits and where they shop and where they eat and what they like to read and all that it is then able to feed you back stuff that fits who you are. That's the danger. You're getting stuck in your own silo, where it's not, the danger isn't that, I don't want to use it because I'd rather think for myself. That's That's fine. Do that. But don't forget, they have so much data and information about you individually that they can tailor ads for who they think you want to vote for. That's scary.
Yeah.
Because you're not all getting the same information.
Yeah,
that kind of got off track for history. But
well, I always think it's fascinating how I'll follow somebody on my drug of choice is Instagram, and I'll follow somebody on Instagram and they have like 8 million followers, and I mention him to you, not political necessarily, but I've mentioned him to you, and you're like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah,
no, and so
that's right.
But in the year 2000, everybody kind of had the same set of people, and now it's just totally different. You can't assume that.
I follow Instagram some, and I may be getting some of the people you like later today because your phone is close to mine.
100%. That's exactly right. Yeah. I don't know if you saw.
You're going to get a lot of car shows when you start looking at your Instagram. I watch a lot of those.
My wife and I sit beside each other on the couch, and she looks at my phone, and she's like, it's just like what you said, your feed is so much different. I love to watch people fall down. And she does not like that. She doesn't. She's a nurse. She doesn't want to see that. She's like, these are problems. The little girl saying, "Pet that dog." I've watched that one like 1,000 times. I love that one. If I'm having a bad day, just pull up pet that dog. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So that's what you want to. You want to leave your students with that maybe,
Well, that and a real focus on, especially in Stone Owl, and this was not something we talked about in public school because, first of all, it wasn't part of the curriculum. And in teaching a tested subject as I did, which was U.S. history, you had to go by the book. Yeah. In fact, if you didn't stick to the timeline in the book, you didn't get it all done, and then you shortchanged some kid on the state test. Yeah. But in Stone Owl, one of the things we talk a lot about is living virtuously. The Founding Fathers, they in their writings, in their letters to each other, in some public speeches, they talked about how that this system of government would not work if two things were not in place. One, if people aren't educated, and they meant really be educated. Don't let CNN or Fox educate you. You go get educated. They didn't mean just read and write. You certainly needed to know that so you could read the Constitution, so you could read the Declaration of Independence. If people aren't educated, they will be swayed. That was a real danger. But the other danger was if you're not practicing living a virtuous life yourself and you're governing your own actions and your own thoughts, then how can we govern ourselves as a country together? So be educated, practice living a virtuous life. And we talk about virtues in Stone Owl and we use, Aristotle's list. The Boy Scouts have a list. Benjamin Franklin had a list. The Bible has a list. But, Aristotle's whole thought was there's extremes to each virtue. And you don't want to be far to one side or the other. You don't want to be deficient or you don't want to be excessive in it. You want to be in the middle, what he called the golden mean. And so if you're not practicing those things, then you're not working to live a virtuous life. And that's what the founders thought was crucial to whether or not this experiment in self-government would even work. And a lot of high school kids don't think about that because they don't have concrete examples. But one of the examples I often use is one that happened to me one time at the Target parking lot, and I opened my car door on a windy day, and it blew the door and it knocked the mirror off the car next to me. Yeah. And, I posed to students, what are my choices in that instance? Well, of course, somebody's going to say drive off. Really, nobody saw me. Right. I could have easily reparked somewhere else. Yeah.
Especially if it was the days before surveillance cameras.
Right. No cameras.
Yeah.
I could put a fake note on their car so people around me would think I'm actually taking ownership of it. I could sit around and wait. I don't know what I could do. Yeah, fake number. Yeah. Or I could put information under their windshield that said who I am and I did this and I want to pay for it. And I use that because it happened to me, and it happened with one of my daughters in the car with me. And I think, did I do the right thing because I wanted my daughter to know I did the right thing, or did I do it because I would have done it by myself? Those are the kind of things you have to wrestle with because, what is that saying? People who are truly free have no choice because they already know what they're going to do in a situation. They don't have to choose. They know they're going to leave a note and they're going to take ownership of that problem. That's living virtuously. And ironically, just this last week, a friend of one of my daughters her roommate hit her car and owned up to it and said, I hit your car. Yeah. I need to pay for it. That girl's dad, who carries the insurance, came over and refused to pay for it and claimed that his daughter didn't hit that car. To me, that was the excess of being dishonest, of honesty. Wow. The mean in the middle is that you practice being honest. You practice being civil. You practice temperance. You practice compassion, whatever list of virtues you want to go down. But if you're not consciously making those decisions, or if you haven't thought through some of the possible scenarios ahead of time and how you know you should act, you're liable to act the wrong way. Yeah.
There's a phenomenon that happened, and I'm certain you know what it is, where I was a grad student, and I think right around there, the No Child Left Behind bill, act, whatever it was, came along, and I saw it switch from just learning things to, Dr. Bailey, is this going to be on the test? Mm-hmm. Is this going to be on the test? Mm-hmm. Is this going to be on the test? And I'm like, will you stop with this? And they still won't do it. I mean, it's still just like ingrained in their brain, because all they think is like, is this going to be on the test? And I've done a deep dive on AI. I've done such a deep dive on AI that my wife is sick of me talking about it. And anyway, but for my students, I tell them, I'm like, okay, I'm an instructor at Hendrick. I'm an instructor at the gym. And so I say, like, okay, students, there's weight over there. Like, you can get a machine to move it for you. But the deal is, you need to move the weight. Like, mm-hmm. When you pick up the weight, you change, mm-hmm. you get stronger. Mm-hmm. And so it's like what you're talking about. But in the classroom, the whole point of education was to be a better person. Yeah. And we've lost that idea.
Well, and you may need to edit this out, but as a longtime public teacher, yeah. where we went wrong and where No Child Left Behind started us down that path is everybody does teach to the test now because you have to.
You have
because
to.
Schools
yeah.
are graded on it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
In fact, it's down to the point where individual teachers are graded on it.
Yeah. Sure.
And so, people who are older and never were in public school under that kind of a system don't understand how it changed public education. Yeah, it has greatly changed public education. Yeah. That's a different topic.
I mean, it is really, really important how we understand history, how we understand World War I and World War II. I'll tell a story that's vague, but there was a high school student who was in a class, and they said, the teacher said, like, we got up to World War I, they're like, we don't have time for World War I. We got to skip over this to whatever. And then they got to World War II, and they're like, we got to keep going. We don't have time for it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, World War I and World War II, these monumental events that they didn't even really talk about. Yeah. So what I like about the May presentation is that you choose, it's not just like general ideas about Abilene, it's like specific people and specific stories. I think it would be this will never happen, but it would be so interesting to teach, for example, U.S. history based on people mm-hmm. and go through somebody's life, because we remember the stories, but the dates we don't really, we're like, the war of this and this and this happened, the Zimmerman telegraph, like, I don't know, but the people we always think about. Yeah.
One thing you asked, or one of the questions was something that our grandparents endured, and we can't appreciate it. And when I got the question, I thought, and this hadn't been all that long ago, the lack of connectivity. Because, you remember, I'm older than you are, but, when I was a teenager or in my 20s, you could try to get somebody on the phone and you might not reach them on the phone for 3 or 4 days. They just weren't there, or the phone was busy, or whatever. You didn't know, and you know where they were. You didn't know when they were coming home. And that is so foreign today. I mean, in World War II, people sent their sons off to war, and they didn't know when they were coming home. You didn't serve a year. You served till the war was over. Nobody knew when the war was going to be over. Yeah. You didn't know if they were dead or alive. Yeah. That lack of connectivity would drive us insane today. I mean, pretty much you can tell if you follow people's location, you know exactly where they are. And so I think that was something that really struck me about just we weren't as connected in that way.
Yeah.
We weren't near as visually connected in that we didn't share photos and videos and all that. But.
Which probably meant that I had to connect with people right here more.
That's right.
Yeah. I call you on the phone. Is Jay there? No, he's gone.
He's gone.
Where? They're like,
I don't know. I don't know. When's he coming back? I don't know. He didn't tell me. He didn't leave a note.
One time, one of these twins, one of my twins, he was like 9 or 10 years old, and we left the house, and I left my phone, which felt crazy. And we drove to Hamlin and back, and I got back, and I told my wife, I was like, "We're back," and she didn't even know. Yeah. I left my phone, but it felt so foreign to me to leave my phone.
Doesn't it though? It's part of you.
Yeah. But yeah, so people just leave, and our grandparents would have no concept of this. No. They would also, I feel like they endured so much hardship that we have no idea. We have no idea about.
No.
Yeah.
A whole lot of fear too that we don't know about, especially as it relates to medicine. You know, before the early 1960s, you lived in fear that your child might contract polio.
Yeah.
You know, there's no such thing as polio, really. I mean, the cases, unfortunately, because of some people's takes on vaccines, polio has actually resurged in places, not as bad as measles has. But some of those fearful things that you had because you had kids, we don't fear them at all. I always ask my students, I said, raise your hand if you got a smallpox vaccine, and 2 or 3 will raise their hand, they got a smallpox vaccine. I'll say, no, you didn't. I said, you might have got a chickenpox vaccine. I said, you're probably just remembering it wrong, because since 1972 or 3, no one in the United States has had a smallpox vaccine, because it's wiped off the face of the earth. There is no smallpox. Yeah. Well, smallpox would have killed you at a huge, your chances of dying from smallpox were immense if you got it. Yeah. It's not even around anymore. No. It's in a vial in some lab, and that's it. Yeah. And so those things, medicine has just advanced in such a way that we can't even appreciate it, because it's happened over a period of time, and our lives haven't covered that whole span, and it's happened kind of slowly. I mean, incrementally, you just don't realize it. But modern medicine is unreal. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that they're now able to tailor some drugs to you. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just phenomenal. Yeah, for sure. Doses, and I think the next, I mean, this is kind of controversial, but I think the next frontier is nutrition, and like tailoring things specifically for people's nutrition, maybe. Yeah. But my grandpa lived through the Great Depression, and he would wash Ziploc bags. He would, you know, like on the drying rack, he would wash them out and like dry them, because he's going to save them. Yeah. Because that's how much, you know, that's the poverty level that they went through. Yeah. The amount of things that we have would probably startle our great grandparents. Yeah. We have so much stuff. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, just look around at the number of storage units in Abilene, Texas. How many places have storage units? We have one, and I couldn't even tell you what's in there. What they owned was in their house, and their closets were pretty small. Yeah. We look at the houses they built in Abilene. Oh, yeah. In 1960, and they're a 3-1. Yeah. And tiny. Yeah. Yeah. But back then they weren't. Yeah. It's all perspective. I mean, my kids go to school at Cooper. Those neighborhoods right across the street from Cooper are all those really small houses. But you know, when I went to Cooper in the 70s, I didn't think of them as small houses. I thought of them as nice houses. Yeah. And they were medium income houses. Yeah. And I didn't think of them as small. Today I think of them as small. Yeah. Because it's just changed so much. Do you know about the Cooper tunnels? Yeah, I do know about the Cooper tunnels. I've never been in the Cooper tunnels, but I'm aware of them. That's a big thing. That's a big area of conversation in my house, is the Cooper tunnels. Yes. Have they been in them? Yes. They have not been in them, but they've been tempted by the Cooper tunnels. Yeah. Yes. And they've apparently made a vow to not go in the Cooper tunnels, and to look away from the tunnels. So it's so funny. High school has changed a lot. When I taught high school, I didn't sense, and I could be totally wrong about this, and your sons could tell me for sure. But when I was in high school, it seemed like there was more of a connection to your school. And these days, the kids I was teaching, they didn't seem like they had quite the connection to the place. Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah. Yeah. Like school pride or something? Or pride, and just that's kind of their identity. And all their friends went to that school, and you knew who everybody was. And, you know, I taught at Abilene, some kids, they just didn't know other people. I mean, I could have told you who the quarterback was when I was a sophomore and knew some senior. Well, they didn't know who the quarterback was. They just didn't keep up with it. It just wasn't a place of social connection like Today, it doesn't seem to be that way.
Yeah.
I could be totally wrong about that.
What's like, where do you see, I mean, the data centers in Abilene are changing Abilene, but what does Abilene look like? Like, where are we going? You're locked into that, like where we come from, and I don't know, where are we going?
I've been asked that a lot, and I'm not
Have you
sure I
really?
know. I think
Yeah.
that's more of a futurist question than a historian question. But like I said earlier, I think the data centers, right now the way it's affected Abilene is a lot more people. You see a lot more trucks. You see a lot more out-of-state license plates. Yeah. You see a lot more traffic at 5 o'clock. You see higher rents and all that. But I think a whole lot of that is temporary because it's while the data centers are being built. I was at some event, and the guy who's out here at the first one, I guess they call it Stargate, they had 8,000 people out there working that day. And he said more than half of those don't live in Abilene. They come here to work. Well, they're going to leave when it's finished.
Right.
And so will it change Abilene? I'm not sure the population will change. And I do think that rents will settle back down and all of that. What I hope isn't true is that they're not polluting the air with something out there. I don't know if you've seen PBS's little documentary on this one out here, but and maybe that's blown out of proportion. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, and I'm willing to say I don't know enough about it. But I just don't see them changing Abilene all that much. I do think we've moved up on the Chinese and Russian nuclear hit list because the B-21, because of data centers and all that, but we were already high on the list anyway, so that doesn't really matter.
Right. But you said in Lake Fort Phantom, because we have that, we have DIAS, right?
Well, Abilene voters went to the polls in the middle of the Great Depression, middle of the 1930s, 1936, to vote on whether or not to pass a bond to build a lake. Well, most people are like, I don't need to pay more money. I don't need my taxes to go up to pay for a bond. I can barely pay the rent. Right. And there was a big debate about whether or not that would pass. And it passed by 150 votes. And so the dam was built across Elm Creek out there. 2 years later, that lake was full. 2 years after that, when it looked like we were definitely headed or needed to be getting ready in case we had to fight in World War II, the United States Army needed a place to put Army training camps, and they picked out southeast or southwest of Abilene, where Camp Barkley was. They picked that spot as one of the camps, and they said the only reason we would come to Abilene is you have excess water. We need the water. Because if we're going to bring 50,000 more people to a town that has 25,000 people, there better be a lot of water there. Yeah. And we had a lot of water. Yeah. And Camp Barkley was kind of like the data centers. All this flood of people came in. But once the war was over, they left. What we were left with, though, was connections to the War Department, as it was called then, and as some call it now. And we had political connections because of getting Camp Barkley. The same people that worked on getting Camp Barkley then turned around and went back to Washington to see if we couldn't convince them to put another military installation here. We tried hard to become the home of the United States Air Force Academy. We didn't win that. Wow. But one thing that we had left over from World War II was what was known as the Abilene or the Thai Army Air Base. And the Thai Army Air Base was out there close to Camp Barkley. It was another military installation, and it came there because Camp Barkley was there. Well, when the war was over, the government gave us Thai Army Air Base, and we were going to use it as our airport. Instead, what we did, and what happened was we actually were able to turn it into an Air Force base. And I don't think Abilene would have ever been chosen as the home for an Air Force base, and on top of that, a Strategic Air Command base, had that Thai Army Air Base not been available. And we had to go buy more land to entice the Air Force here, just as we had to buy more land to entice Camp Barkley here. So we'd already seen what it could do if people would invest some money, buy the land, and how it could change your economy. Camp Barkley vaulted Abilene out of the Great Depression. And because of that, those political connections, because we understood what it meant to go out and spend some money to make something like that happen, we wound up getting an Air Force base. And DIAS is by far the largest employer around here. You can't imagine the economic impact. I used to know the numbers, but I've since forgotten them. It was huge. Yeah. And so I think, what if we hadn't passed that bond issue in the 30s to build the lake? We would have never have gotten the Army base. I probably didn't have gotten the Thai Army Air Base. None of that would have happened. I think the same thing about Shotwell Stadium. It passed by 150 votes.
Which is like, how many people lived in
Well,
Abilene then?
in that vote, there was more people voting, but it wasn't a huge number.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Oh, okay.
voter turnout in any local election is pretty small. But Shotwell Stadium has brought so much economic impact to Abilene, and it barely passed.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what started this question. I've lost track of it. But
Well, what I think is interesting is because of water leads to leads over to Dias, leads to this, and leads to this. What is the data center going to lead to?
that's what we don't know. It
Yeah,
could lead to something
yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah.
or maybe it could lead to something we don't like. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you just never know what those decisions make. And, someday when the history of Stargate and all that is written, and somebody starts back, because Abilene is different. We didn't start off with, let's build a data center, or no one came here and said, let's build a data center. Lancium came here because they wanted to build a place where they could mine cryptocurrency. And they had the land, and they were bringing in the electrical infrastructure to drive that when they were approached or they approached OpenAI or Oracle, one of those, to use the same land and turn it into a data center. Yeah. So you see, San Angelo is voting to not have one, or these other towns are. Well, we didn't vote on it because Lancium had already been here and was in place. Huh. Yeah. And so that's one of the stories that'll probably get lost in translation because people forget the facts. That's what I think about, and I've mentioned this in the presentation in May. There's always been this misperception around here that the Paramount Theater was on the verge of being torn down, turned into a parking lot. Yeah. And that was not true. It was never true. And where it drives from was an incorrect headline in the paper that mentioned that, and it was not true. In fact, the people who owned it at the time were already willing to donate it so that it could stay as a theater and be refurbished and all that. But it got going because of that headline. And I've heard so many people over the years talk about it was just this close to being torn down into a parking lot. It was like within hours. None of that was true. It was never true. So sometimes people forget the facts and they pick and choose and they remember what they want to remember or make up what they want to make up, I guess.
Sometimes I feel like I'm seeing the same world as people, and then I read the comments.
Yeah.
And I'm like, apparently we're not seeing the same world at all. No. I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. There's this phenomenon that I'm certain that you've seen before. So forever I've taught at Hardin Simmons, and it's just like a little example of history. So I'm on this committee, and I did 2 3-year terms. So we start here, and we start doing things, and we turn a dial, and it doesn't really work. We're like, no, we wanted it to do this, but it doesn't do that. That dial doesn't do that. Well, then you get more people, that person rotates off the committee, new people rotate on the committee. So then I'm like 4 years into it, and they're like, hey, we should do this. And I'm like, that dial doesn't do that. It literally doesn't do what you think it's going to do. And so, and I felt like a curmudgeon, like, we already tried that or whatever. Yeah. But what is interesting about history to me is that we forget why we even don't touch that dial, or why we did touch the dial earlier, Yeah. And like the Paramount example, you're like, no, that's not how that's really not.
The classic example is, the woman making the pot roast and cutting the end off of it.
Right. Yeah.
And really we do forget. Nobody traces back and go, oh, well, that's why we did that.
Yeah.
It's hard to give that much thought to something sometimes. Yeah.
We're talking about media, and one of the things that media scholars have talked about is the nuance of a story gets boiled down to and our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And they say that there's media scholars who talk about like global IQ peaked in 2015, and we're just, and our attention span is just clipping down farther and farther. Well, a lot of those historical examples, they require a lot of backstory.
That's right.
For you to get to the conclusion.
And a lot of nuance, as you said. People don't want to give it that much thought. They just want to take, that's wrong, or that's right. And really, sometimes it's not quite as black and white or as easy to understand as you're willing to boil it down to.
Right. I try to tell my students, I have a little Wisdom Wednesday thing. Sometimes it's Sometimes it's light and sometimes it's really heavy. Sometimes it's spiritual or practical or whatever. But I always say you can spot an expert because they say the words, it depends. Should I do this? Well, it depends. If you have $1 million and you want to invest it, well, where should you invest it? Well, it depends. There's a lot of things. Well, we're right at an hour. So what do you want to plug? What conclusions? What do you want to leave us with? What do you want to plug? We shouldn't even talk about your thing at the Paramount because it's sold out. And so you don't need any more, more people. Are you going to go to 2 nights?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that I have anything to plug.
Yeah. If we have a high schooler, the Stone Owls program.
Yeah,
maybe,
that.
Yeah.
And Stone Owl is more than just the high school program. It's also adult programming. In fact, August 18th, I'm doing a program at Abilene Heritage Square called We Hold These Truths. Yeah. And it really is a look at what connects us as Americans. And I'm hoping that I think there'll be enough seats. There's 650 in that auditorium. I'm debating, though, if it turns out that that's not enough, about turning around, just doing it again at an hour later because it's about an hour program.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's at the library, so if you didn't get a seat, you go look at books for an hour, I guess.
Yeah,
anyway, sure. So it's also adult programming, but also the Abilene aspect. Abilene presentations, the books are out on Abilene. I do a lot of talking about Abilene. That's all part of Stone Owl. Yeah. It's all under the umbrella of Stone Owl. Stone Owl Scholars is the high school part, and that's what your kids will be in. Yeah. But as far as plugging that, I'm not much on plugging myself. So no.
Do you have a favorite U.S. history book?
I have a favorite book that covers some U.S. history. I wouldn't call it a history book. And I urge people to read it all the time. And I'm sure they don't ever read it. But I don't know if you're familiar with Willa Cather's Death Comes for the Archbishop.
No.
She wrote it in the 1930s. Willa Cather, she wrote My Antonia and some other books that have been turned into movies, but she's from Nebraska. But she wrote a book that is loosely based on fact or on the lives of Bishop Lamy, who was the Archbishop of what was now New Mexico, and he built the cathedral that's in Santa Fe. And this was in the 1870s, 1880s. And it's the story of his life and his friend who came with him from France to come to the United States as Catholic priests. Later, Lamy became an archbishop and his friend became a bishop. And it's just the story of their life. And it tells a lot of history of that part of the world. But also, and I read it usually once a year, if not more, because I don't want to forget it. It's really the story of how one person can impact those around him and how he changed the people that he encountered. And, he's not some grandiose figure. Most people don't know him. They never heard of him. But if you haven't read it, you should at least go to the Wikipedia page and read the summary or something. Yeah. But Death Comes for the Archbishop. It's considered a classic. And some people consider it Willa Cather's finest book. So, right.
I find myself going back. Right. I don't even know why. I've started novels in like the 60s and 70s in the last year.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know why. But I do have those books that I reread every year that I really love. Yeah.
Well, the other thing about reading is it gets you off your phone.
It does.
Unless you're reading on your phone.
I know.
But it's so, I found 2 things that get you off your phone. Reading and doing a jigsaw puzzle. You can't do a jigsaw puzzle while you're on your phone. Anyway. So do you take all this? So is your podcast, is it visual? I mean, is it if somebody watches, as I didn't click on your link. So you edit all this down so I don't look stupid. And
no, this is great. This is all good. We'll cut a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, well, Jay Moore, thanks for coming by.
You bet.
We did it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.